Good evening everyone, welcome to the Town Hall for this special occasion tonight for the annual meeting of the Council, better known as Mayor Making. Could I ask you just to remain standing while Mark, my chaplain, says a few words. Thank you, Mark.
Good evening. Well, each council meeting during the past year, we've been working our way through the Lord's Prayer to better understand what we pray. And today we're thinking about the phrase, lead us not into temptation. It was Oscar Wilde who famously said, I can resist everything except temptation. And I'm sure we'd all agree. But if we're honest, we often put ourselves in temptation. We open a box of Thorntons and we'll say, just one. Or open a bottle of wine and say, just one glass. Perhaps we think we're stronger than we are. But it's better to assume that we're weaker than we are. And in the Lord's Prayer, we can ask God to allow us not to be tempted, to recognise our weakness. So, if you'd like to join me now, I'd like us to say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Forgot about that. And also, just a reminder as well that most of our meetings are filmed. This one tonight will be filmed and put out on YouTube via the council's website normally in a couple of days' time. Can I just remind, because I didn't do it, just remind people to switch their microphones on when they want to speak, and when they're finished speaking to turn them off, which allows the next person. Thank you. So that takes us on to item number 2, which is the election of chairman of the council to be styled mayor for the ensuing municipal year. Could I have nominations, please? Councillor Longdon.
Could I nominate Mr Mayor, Councillor Chris Watkins, to be styled mayor for the next municipal year? I've known Chris for many years now, and prior to him becoming a councillor, he was very active in our community. And he's also a founder member of the Stockingford Community Association, which he thought was a licence to give me and other councillors enough, although he wanted things to happen 10 minutes after he first thought of it, and sometimes 10 minutes before he actually thought of it. This was a trait that he brought with him when he became a councillor, and it took a while for him to settle down. But settle down he did, and he's a hard-working councillor and has been very active in getting improvements to the housing stock in Kingswood Ward, and was very involved in the first new council housing being built in 30 years at what became known as King's View, which I call Watkins Folly. Chris was also the Borough Heart Champion, working in conjunction with the British Heart Foundation, which led to the Green Gyms, in part, which I've seen but I've never used. I don't think I'm ever likely to use them, although I've seen others use them, and they were very appreciative and enjoyed the equipment. He was also the local Police and Crime Commissioner representative until the posts were disbanded. He said he got sacked, but everybody else got sacked in the county as well. So Chris was born and he grew up in Stockingford and went to local schools, all approved, of course. And Stan Williams, a former councillor and mayor of the borough, was his godfather. He was mayor of the borough in 1966. His dad was secretary of the former Stockingford Labour Club, and he once fined me £3 for being late paying my subs. So there is a bit of pedigree in there somewhere. He said I could say anything that I liked. So I looked for a few skeletons, but I couldn't find them. And the only questionable thing that he's done recently is get on the karaoke machine in the middle of an election and then put it out on Facebook. That would have been all right if he'd inherited a Welsh singing voice. But unfortunately, it's more like a rusty hacksaw going through a galvanised bucket. However, he did survive, and he's here today to prove it. Chris is very much a people's person and a man of the people, and his commitment to Kingswood Ward and this borough is second to none. You won't hear anybody say anything bad about this borough. I think he will be perfect choice for the mayor, and with Colette, his wife, by his side, there will be a major asset, and I'm sure they will serve, represent and promote our borough extremely well over the coming year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second the nomination of Councillor Chris Watkins to the position of Chair of Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, and I do so for the following reasons. I first became aware of the name Chris Watkins long before I became involved in local government, and indeed the reason Chris's name was familiar to me was because he was so active in the local community, always involved in some scheme or campaign to improve the area he grew up in and now works so hard to represent. The particular scheme that I equated with the name Chris Watkins in those days was the Ford Festival, which was held at Stockingford Recreation Ground, to which I took my boys along to every summer. Chris was also instrumental in securing several improvements to the rec, for which many children and families owe him a debt of gratitude. I will not list all of his other achievements, as we'll be here all night. But when I heard Chris's name had been put forward for mayor, I sought out the memories of his sister Shirley, with whom I work. It's quite unnerving when members of your family crop up sometimes. Anyway, back to Chris's sister. Her clearest memory of Chris as a young boy, don't look so worried, Chris. Shirley's abiding memory of you is the amount of action men you had. She told me she was always stumbling over action men. There were action men all over the house, each one getting up to something different. What a fitting memory, as the best descriptor I can think of for you is that of a man of action. A fully grown, real-life action man, if you will. I remember, for instance, when I was first elected, Chris became my unofficial mentor, and he took me on the tour of the town hall, introducing me to officers who all seemed to hold him in high esteem. But he also took me on several tours of the borough, and one I shall never forget took place in the back of a fire engine. Chris's energy and enthusiasm has not let up, and he is forever contacting me and my colleagues with an idea for improving the borough. And Chris's special skill is in transforming those ideas into reality. So, as a mayor, I have no doubt that Chris, accompanied by his stunning wife Colette, will be an absolute asset to the borough. I only ask that he does not set the bar too high as mayor with his action man type activities, bearing in mind that someone has to follow him next year. Although Chris himself has plenty to live up to if wing walking is a sign of things expected of Nuneaton and Bedworth mayors. So I'll leave it there, but just say that it gives me great pleasure to second the nomination of Councillor Chris Watkins. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any other nominations? Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to propose Councillor Graham to be the Mayor of Nuneaton and Bedworth for the forthcoming municipal year.
Is that seconded? Okay, thank you. Right, okay. In that case, it's sort of a straight vote. So if I can ask all those in favour of Councillor Watkins. If you can keep your hands up so we make sure we... Sorry, they don't count down there. Got it, Phil?
Yep.
And all those in favour of Councillor Graham? I'll make that 17-17.
Chair's casting vote.
Okay, the vote there is equal. It's 17-17, but I will use my casting vote as the chairman to Councillor Watkins. Thank you. So can I just make it formal that Councillor Watkins be elected chairman of the Borough Council of Nuneaton and Bedworth to be styled mayor for the ensuing municipal year. At this point, it's for us to retire from the room. Alan?
It is,
Yeah.
Mr Mayor.
And if
All rise, please.
Sat down first.
Right, okay, thank you. Everybody, could you all be seated?
Mr. Mayor, if I could ask if you're willing to sign the Declaration of Acceptance of Office, reading those words.
Okay. I, Chris Watkins, having been elected to the office of Mayor of the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, declare that I take the office upon myself and will duly and faithfully fulfil the duties of it in accordance with the best of my judgment and ability. Thank you.
Many thanks.
Right. Councillors, former mayors and mayoresses, officers of the council, ladies and gentlemen, family members and friends. It gives me great pleasure in welcoming you here tonight on what is a special occasion for myself and my family. I can honestly say, after being elected in 2010, that I didn't think that I would be ever standing here today. It feels strange because back in 1966, my godfather Stan Williams, as you just heard, was taking me to the church to be christened. He then, of course, became mayor again back in 1984, which at that time caused a bit of a stir because he was mayor for a second time. So it looks like I'm going to be carrying something on. I would just like to say that if you're looking for any long speeches, you might want to leave by the doors that you've came in because you won't be getting them through me. I would like to think of myself as a doer rather than a talker. I would like to start by giving out some thanks. First one, obviously, going to my wife Colette, putting up for me over the years of being a councillor, dashing in from work, through the door, and to a meeting. The same goes to my family, my son, daughter, stepson, who have rarely seen me over the past few years because of work commitments and council commitments. I would then like to thank Barry and Joan for everything they do for me, especially around election times, and for the kind words tonight, although they weren't that bad. I'd like to thank Tricia for her kind words and for her kind words over the years. I'd also like to thank all the councillors that have helped me over the years, because without you, I wouldn't be here today. I'd also like to thank the many council officers for their advice, hard work, that keeps me going as well, and sees everything that I try to achieve, get achieved. It's a bit of a shame, really, because Colette's parents, my parents, my eldest sister Maureen, and of course my uncle Bri cannot be here today. But no doubt they're looking down on me now, having a good laugh. So there we go. I know you have heard some things about me from Barry and Trish, but just to let you know why I started getting involved in the council and then becoming a councillor, I will go over what I have done in very brief. As you've heard, I've lived in Stockyford all my life. When I was 20, I moved all the way from Orchard Road, all the way around the corner. I moved from Westbury Road all the way around the corner to Orchard Road. And then when my mother died in 98, my father died in 2000, I moved all the way back from Orchard Road back to Westbury Road. So I haven't been far. The reason I started doing things was because I was taking my dog a walk around the wreck, and the people that was complaining about antisocial behaviour brought my attention to looking at why there were so many people out in the streets causing problems. And this was mainly because they had nowhere to hang out. So Stockyford Wreck was my main target. There were no benches, bins, lights, anything working. So this made me set up a residents' association back in 2003,
and the journey began. The lights were fixed, the benches put back in, the bins put back in, and the young people started to return to the rec because they had something to go. After that, the multi-use games area was renewed, and I got funding for a new BMX track, which saw the antisocial behaviour reduced by 50%. So this inspired me to do more, which then, working Warwickshire Carver, I got a grant for £7,000 for the first Ford Family Festival, which paid for fair rides, face painting, live bands, donkey rides, you name it. It was all free, but it was a free family fun day, which seemed to work. Again, working with Carver, I then got over £80,000 for the first concrete skate park in the Borough, which was and still is a great success with so many people using it. This then led to more help from Carver for over £30,000 for an outside gym on a fitness trail which leads you around Stockford Rec. And then I had some graffiti art done, which in my opinion is some of the best in the borough, and was a garage site that we had done. And it was sadly for five young people that had lost their lives for different circumstances. These were Brandon Woodruff, Jordan Terrace, Charlotte Smith, Jordan Cobby and Jordan Moore. They were all from Nuneaton, but they all lost their lives young. This then led on to me asking for donations for a memorial garden to be put in front of the portraits, and this was met with from businesses to pay for the garden. And this also gives the families of the young people somewhere to carry on planting if they wish to. It was then that Roma Taylor asked me if I'd ever thought about becoming a councillor, to which I quickly replied, no. However, after talking to a few councillors, I gave it some thought and decided to give it a go. And after just winning my third election, here I am. And I'm so proud to be mayor of this amazing borough. This is a job that I will take very seriously, and I will give this role 100%. However, I have an hard act to follow, because Bill and Sheila have been excellent over this past year, doing things almost every day, and even taking the time out to give Colette and myself tours of the parlour and explaining some of the difficult jobs that we'll have. People say that life begins at 40, and mine seems to have been a little later and started at 50. 3 granddaughters being born in 6 days, with our 4th grandchild due in October this year, which will be our first grandson. So thank you, Lee, Brandon and Cassie, for giving us Ollie, Ivy, Ruby, and to be confirmed at a later date. Also, for those of you that were not here last year, and those of you that can or can't remember, just a week or so after being deputy mayor, I slipped in the kitchen and broke my foot. And no, I was not drunk. And that is something that I have no intention of doing again this year. I do, however, intend to be fair, but I will also be firm when chairing the meetings. I will be announcing my charity under the announcement section later, and of course be letting you know of the many things that I have planned to raise money for my charity. But one of them will be a parachute jump, and I will be involving most of my family, just not my wife. If Bill can do a wing walk, then I can do a parachute jump. And one of Bill's friends that I met at one of Bill's appeals has assured me he can arrange this. I'm just hoping that it's all safe. I'd now like to lead on to a very special thank you to RS Components, who have been amazing with my wife Colette, allowing her some flexible time to go in late, to leave early, so that she can fulfil the duties with me in representing this borough. My employers, Hermes, however, have not been so understanding and have in fact made me redundant. So, if any of you know of any jobs going, part-time of course, please feel free to pass on my details. So now we'll lead on to the vote of thanks.
My congratulations to you on becoming Mayor. I'm sure you will have a wonderful evening, a wonderful year. I have this evening the pleasurable task of proposing a vote of thanks to the previous Mayor, Councillor Bill Hancock and Mayoress Sheila Hancock. Bill and Sheila have had an extremely busy year, both attending functions where they have been invited by organisations and groups within our great borough, and also events to support their chosen charity. I have myself seen them firsthand on many occasions. The way they have performed their role is second to none. They have been a credit to the borough. An example of this recently was, while taking to my son to school, a parent approached me and said, "You know the Mayor and Mayoress. Could you please pass on my thanks to them both?" They presented my 7-year-old daughter an award for a poem that she wrote. They both took time to spend time with every child in the room that evening, making their evening even more special. Mr Mayor, I move that the best of thanks of this council be tendered to Councillor Bill Hancock and Mrs Hancock for the able and courteous manner in which they have fulfilled their duties of Mayor and Mayoress during this past municipal year. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
What has just been said about yourself, and I hope you have a very enjoyable year. Yes, it's a great pleasure to second the thanks for vote for Bill and his wife. And I've got to say, I've spent a lot of time over the last few months, I think, with Bill. And I thought I got shut of him, and then he kind of woke me up on Sunday at the boat while I was round there doing a drive for my daughter. He's done a fantastic job over the last 2 years in supporting the previous mayor and carrying out his duties, and I second the vote of thanks. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Bill, that's over to you now.
Mr Mayor, and welcome to the big chair. You don't look so lost in it as me. Mr Mayor, Mayoress, councillors, officers and guests, thank you for this opportunity to speak on such a special occasion. Congratulations to you and Colette on becoming the Mayor and Mayoress, and I know that you will enjoy your year in office. Your year will, I know, contain many special moments, including the 100 years since the end of the First World War and the 70th anniversary of the Nuneaton Festival of Arts. Sheila and I would also like to thank you and Colette for the role you have played as our deputies, as well as any scheduled duties you've had. You have stepped in on a few occasions at short notice to cover for us. We hope that your apprenticeship will hold you in good stead for this year. However, Mr Mayor, it was interesting to hear that you'd said that you'd arranged to jump out of a plane and it was arranged through a friend of mine. Well, he's arranged for you to jump out of a plane. He hasn't arranged for a parachute. So, Mr Mayor, we often use words without giving them real consideration. But when I say that it has been an honour and a privilege to have been the first citizen of Nuneaton and Bedworth, I truly mean those words. People often ask, what have been the highlights of the year? Well, it's a difficult one to answer, as the whole year is special. However, the wing walk that was done by my daughter Joy and myself was a high, and will remain in our memories and my stomach. Another high is regaining a room at home which has been stocked floor to ceiling with raffle and tombola prizes. So we've managed to get that back. We've met ambassadors from Nicaragua and Nepal, but topping all that, Mr. Mayor, is being able to meet the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth, young and old, learning of their commitment to our communities, volunteering and fundraising for a diverse range of good causes. Nobody, Mr. Mayor, can tell me that citizenship has died, and we have spoken at many schools, hopefully helping and encouraging young people to be active within their schools and the wider community. Mr. Mayor, I hope you will indulge me in being able to thank those that have helped and supported us throughout our year, and I do apologise if I miss anyone out. From the Managing Director, up to the Town Hall receptionists, porters and council staff, many of them sponsoring me on my wing walk, thank you. A special thanks to the Development Control Team who raised a substantial amount for our mayoral appeal. Mr. Mayor, as probably most people know now, the mayoral appeal was to support the lymphedema clinic, which is based at the Mary Ann Evans Hospice. And we know that the money raised will be of enormous benefit to the users and staff alike. So, Mr. Mayor, back to the thank yous. To the fundraising committee, which was led by Richard Chataway, and all of those many people that have arranged fundraising events for us. The truth is, I've not had to do any of the hard work. Others have done that, and I've just been able to turn up looking pretty on the day, Mr. Mayor. You probably think that I've forgotten, but I haven't. A really special thank you to my wife Sheila, who without her I could not have carried out this role. A true team, except for the washing, ironing, cleaning, etc., which I am now going to stop doing. I'm in trouble now. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I can announce, except for any possible late donations, the total raised for the lymphedema clinic is £33,000. Mr. Mayor, through you, thank you to everyone in Nuneaton and Bedworth for your generosity and support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you for that, Bill. And thank you for your kind words. Right, now I'd like to call the council to order to receive the election of Vice Chair to the Deputy Mayor. Julie.
Sincere congratulations to you and indeed in Colette. I hope you enjoy your year. Mr. Mayor, it gives me great pleasure to propose that Councillor June Tandy be elected as Vice Chairman of the Council for the ensuing municipal year to be styled Deputy Mayor. I do so, Mr. Mayor, knowing that Councillor Tandy will offer her support to you. She has a reputation in local government that I think extends beyond just this chamber but into other local authorities. I know she will serve the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth with integrity and with a great deal of passion. She too was born in our borough, Mr. Mayor, and she's lived actually in the ward she currently does, I think, for all of her life, which is some achievement. So I think you'll share a lot of that local connection, Mr. Mayor, and I have great pleasure in proposing June.
Do we have a seconder for that?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to say anything.
Are there any other nominations? Councillor Wilson.
Can I propose, Mayor, Mr. Mayor?
And,
Can I second?
right, okay then, so this is a straight vote. Those in favour of Councillor Tandy? Those in favour of Brindley Edwards, is it? Okay then, with the casting vote, that's June Tandy. Congratulations. Right. I'd like to move then that Councillor June Tandy be elected Chairman of the Borough, Vice Chairman of the Borough, because I'm Chairman, for the municipal year. The resolution being carried, the new Deputy Mayor will come forward and take place as she's here.
Yeah. Mr Mayor, councillors, officers of the council and guests who are here this evening, my first job is to congratulate you on your appointment as Mayor of this borough, and I would also like to thank everyone in this chamber for allowing me the honour of being Deputy Mayor of this borough. And Mr Mayor, I promise I will be there to support you throughout your year. Thank you.
Right, moving on with business. The appointment of the leader of the council. Well, no. Where we go? Local council. That's all wrong then.
No, you call the council to order and then ask me for apologies.
Oh, right, sorry, yeah, sorry. Are there any apologies received?
No, Mr Mayor. No apologies received this evening.
Minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of April 2018. Approved. Councillor Wilson.
Accurate. I would refer you to page 15 at the question asked by Councillor Golby. The response, memory and both videotape courtesy of YouTube, both verify that Councillor Longdon referred to fairy dust and airy-fairy things going on about people's memories and finances. That is not reflected in the minutes. That was the answer he gave. Therefore, these minutes cannot be accurate.
Right, okay then, so it looks like it's going to go to a vote on whether to approve the minutes or to not approve the minutes. So those in favour of approving the minutes? Those against approving the minutes? Chair's casting votes, then approves the minutes. Interests, and pass over to Alan.
Just to ask members, are there any declarations of personal interests this evening?
Councillor Jackson.
Mr Mayor, my page 26, I can either read them out, Mr Mayor, or would you accept them as read since they are publicly available?
Right, moving on to announcements. I have the following announcements. My charity for the year will be Doorway, and we will be launching that charity appeal tomorrow at 10:30. I would also like to announce a couple of things that will be supporting Doorway in the next few weeks. One is the Run for Nepal on June the 3rd. This is an aid of Doorway, and it's also to help out with the Nepal appeal. That's June the 3rd at Sandon Park. The other one will be a 2-day event, 15th and 16th of June. This is a rugby club, Liberty Way. It's got live music, children's entertainment, camping, great food and drink. And that is also for 2 charities. That's for Zoe's Place and obviously Doorway. So any support that you can give to any of them charities would be much appreciated.
Mr Mayor, no, I don't have any announcements.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is the last meeting for Council, Mr Mayor, where the Managing Director will be in attendance. I'm sure members right across the chamber would join me in thanking Alan for the way that he has performed his role. He has always been very loyal to Nuneaton and Bedworth, very fair, and his advice, I'm sure, right around this chamber has been welcomed, appreciated. You are a wise owl, Alan. We will miss you greatly when we go. Thank you for everything you've done. You've been here now quite a long time, but I wasn't going to say how many years, but we are deeply respectful of your time with us and wish you a fantastic retirement. Thank you.
Managing Director, can you confirm the results of the recent borough elections?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The results are set out in page 4 of the agenda. However, I must confirm that following a recent notification, there's been a slight revision to the composition of the council. The composition is now 17 Labour, 15 Conservative, 1 Green and 1 Independent. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Can I receive nominations for the election of leader?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I nomination of leader of Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, please?
Mr Mayor.
Other nominations? Councillor.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to nominate, please, Councillor Christopher Wilson, and I'd like to also add to Council that it is very clear following the elections that the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth have no faith in the Labour administration, remain that it must be the will of the people must be heard.
Do we have a seconder for that?
Can I also
Mr. Mayor, I will read out the name of each member who will indicate who they are for, whether they are for Councillor Jackson or indeed whether they are for Councillor Wilson. Councillor Beaumont. Jackson. Councillor Brindley-Edwards. Councillor Brown. Councillor Wilson. Councillor Croft. Councillor Wilson. Councillor Daffin. Jackson. Councillor Doughty. Jackson. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Wilson. Councillor Gizane. Councillor Wilson. Councillor Glass. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Wilson. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancox.
Councillor Jackson.
Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Kondaka. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longdon. Councillor Pandia. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor Andrew Sargent. Councillor Jane Sargent. Councillor Jill Shepherd. Councillor Tracy Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins. And Councillor Wilson.
Councillor Jackson to be appointed leader of the Borough of Nuneaton and Bedworth. Well done. I wish to move from the Chair the recommendations set out in this report, set out in the addendum. Is there a seconder to the overview and scrutiny?
Seconded, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Tandy. Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Wilson.
On your appointment, despite our political differences, on a personal level, I know that you're an assiduous member of this council and will do your best in the role. And scrutiny is one of the functions that you have in your 8 years, and having worked with you on scrutiny, know that you fulfil best. But this report before us does not. Restricting the overview and scrutiny to just 2 panels, we advised before the elections, would be disastrous in terms of the scrutiny of this council. And the controlling group ignored us. And just a day before the full council today, we are presented with a fait accompli about which responsibilities each overview and scrutiny panel will hold. Internal will do council budget, finances, revenue and benefits, communications, town centres, again an important area where we are seeing decline in both Nuneaton and Bedworth, grounds maintenance, sports development, civic hall, museum, economic development, allotments, cemeteries, borough plan, something critical that was shown up in the elections, car parks, street names, environmental sustainability, health and safety, and housing, just to name a few of the important areas. How are we, as councillors, meant to hold, especially in no overall control territory we are in now, hold the controlling group, which has no mandate to do what it wants? It got only 35% of the vote, and they are forcing these proposals through, which are effectively proposals on the back of a fag packet. You cannot do all that scrutiny in just 5 meetings. Now, either they intend not to have proper adequate scrutiny because that's been what has happened in the past, or they misled this council when they said it would achieve £9,000 worth of savings, because you will have to call additional meetings in which to fulfil those scrutiny functions. Now, that will mean officer time, that will mean keeping this building open, that will mean publishing agendas. That £9,000 is not a saving if you're calling additional meetings. I will not support this change to the Constitution because I believe that scrutiny is one of the most critical things we do as a council. There are many different challenges facing this authority, especially following the election results. And to do this at a time when we need to be holding the controlling group to account more than ever is not on, Mr Mayor, and I will not support this, and I call for a recorded vote on the results of this because people need to be held to account for their actions.
Councillor Condalker.
I would have voted for you, but the Labour Party slightly upset me with their appointments. I think you'll make a marvellous mayor, though, but we have this important subject to scrutiny. We have 4 pages of items that the Internal Scrutiny Committee will study, and it will have 7 opposition members on it, none of which will be Green, none of which will be the new independent member. It will be 7 Tories and 7 Labour, and it will meet just 5 times a year. This is absolutely appalling. We said before the election, and members of scrutiny panels have said, scrutiny is important. And with 34 councillors, we can do effective scrutiny. If you cannot afford to have 4 scrutiny committees, have 3 scrutiny committees. But to go down to 2 scrutiny committees, one of which is external, which has just a very short list of things to scrutinise, and one which is internal and has a ginormous list of things to scrutinise, is an affront to democracy. Democracy means government by the people. The people elect councillors, and the councillors can ask questions. The councillors can ask officers questions, and the councillors on the internal scrutiny can look at documents. By cutting it down to just 7 opposition councillors, none of which will be anything other than Tories, we're going to have a very, very limited scrutiny. And it's going to result in a lot more extraordinary council meetings and a lot more extra scrutiny meetings being called. And they're going to be almighty long meetings, because just 5 meetings, 4 pages of stuff to cover, it is going to be an almighty mess. And it is a mess because the administration is trying to shut down proper debate. Scrutiny committees are really, really good. They're less political, and we actually talk about issues, be it allotments, borough plan, all sorts of things. We had 3 very good internal scrutiny committees and 1 external scrutiny committee. The Housing Scrutiny Committee did an awful lot of work to try and get housing back in use, look at empty homes, look at all sorts of housing issues. How are we going to cope with 1 scrutiny committee for internal? It is a gerrymandering of democracy, and you can see it from the assignment as well of who goes on what committee. This is a travesty, and I hope the controlling group will actually change these proposals and have at least 2 internal scrutiny committees. And I think if anyone would like to recommend that as a motion, I'd support it. And I hope some of the Labour backbenchers would support having 2 internal scrutiny committees so that we can actually properly scrutinise what this council does. Thank you.
Councillor Golby.
On your appointment. You and I both sit on, or did do, the Communities Scrutiny Committee, and you know as well as I do that we covered some really, really serious topics on there, and we did achieve some good outcomes on there. But I fear that that isn't going to happen anymore, because where's it all going to fit in? I also kind of take objection to the fact that I've had a 64-page document and less than an hour to digest any of the reasonable information that's in there. I mean, it's shutting down transparency not only to councillors like myself, but also cutting down scrutiny shuts down transparency to the council from the public as well. It's one of the ways where the public can actually come in and hold people to account also. We can get external bodies in to come in and explain things like we did with the homeless scrutiny committee. And that was a very long night, and there were complaints about it being a very long night, but it was a worthy topic. And I can't see that transferring over into this new method of an internal and an external, because the agenda items are just going to be way too much. So they're either going to be given lip service or they're just not going to be dealt with. And that's not acceptable. It really isn't acceptable. And the residents shouldn't have to take that as being acceptable either.
Councillor Jackson.
Remind members, at the budget setting meeting, we made it in light of over 60% cuts in government funding to this council. We have to face the reality of where we are. There were lots of cuts that members on this side of the chamber didn't want to make in the budget, but we have to face the reality of the situation we are in. There is every opportunity for overview and scrutiny to work well, and the difference in actually the listings of work, I think, reflect that just health as one external part of scrutiny is enormous. If you think you've got acute provision, you've got primary care, you've got commissioning groups, you've got tertiary provision, I need not go on. Mr. Mayor, we have to work by prioritising. Overview and scrutiny can use working parties, it can use select committees, it is not stuck with just 4-5 meetings a year. I think scrutiny has a massive job to do, but we didn't just look at cutting down the number of scrutiny panels. We also cut down the number of cabinet members, and that has led to later in the agenda me proposing perhaps what on the face of it don't look ultimately logical cabinet positions, but we have to face the reality. Reduced budgets, we want to provide excellent services. Mr. Mayor, in an ideal world, we may have wanted to have kept 4 scrutiny panels. The reality is we have to look very, very carefully at what we're doing in the best interests of the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth. And this, Mr. Mayor, is the way forward for this council at this moment in time. Thank you.
Walmsley.
I'd like to make a couple of points, really. Again, I'd like to echo those points that Councillor Wilson made earlier. And in fact, what Councillor Wilson predicted seems now to be coming true from the statement we just had from Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jackson is suggesting there could be further subcommittees, there could be further select committees, all of which will cost additional money for things like keeping the building open, for officer time and for printing. And the final remark, and you'll be pleased to hear I'm keeping it brief, is that actually Councillor Jackson talks about the financial implications, and it's not a decision she wanted to take. I'll remind her in the Conservative shadow opposition budget, it was very clear. We were seeing a plan with the same parameters. We came up with suggestions which kept all scrutiny panels in place. If she doesn't want scrutiny, or if she doesn't want to keep the panels in place, she can stand down and let an opposition come to power who are willing to do so. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Election, Councillor Watkins. I would have hoped that after a while you would have got the two of us figured out. I'll let you off, but congratulations anyway. I was just going to echo the points that Councillor Walmsley has already made. I'd just like everybody to spare a thought for any campaigners, residents, chairs of various community groups who will have to attend these meetings and may have to wait a very long time for their points to be heard, just because there won't be enough time for adequate scrutiny on what matters to them and their points that they very rightly have the ability, perhaps diminished ability, to raise with us. Thank you.
Okay, move to the vote.
It's recording. Okay. Perhaps my cloak of invisibility is working really well tonight.
Go on then, speak.
On your election as mayor, I remember when we worked together at Nuneaton and Bedworth Leisure Trust as council appointees, and we worked well together. But I would just like to echo what's been said from this side of the chamber here tonight. We've got a situation where, I could actually support something that brought greater clarity and focus to scrutiny, because, by goodness, the council needs greater clarity and scrutiny. I'm a big believer in the fact that the effectiveness of any meeting is in inverse proportion to the number of people that attend it. So that normally that would be really good. But in this case, we've got a situation where the proposals seem designed to dilute scrutiny. As has already been pointed out, we've got on a list here of 54 different action points or areas of responsibility. 49 of them are in one panel and 5 of them are in the other panel. But the numbers of members sitting on the 2 panels are equal. So the distribution of work is not equal. I don't know who was tasked with dividing up these 54 items and got them equally divided into 49 in one panel and 5 in the other. Some sort of Diane Abbott type maths, perhaps, I would suggest.
Right, is there anybody else that would like to speak on this? No. So can we move to the vote then, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will read out the names of each member who will indicate if they are for or against the recommendations as attached in relation to the overview and scrutiny arrangements. Councillor Beaumont. For. Councillor Brindley Edwards. Yes. Councillor Brown. Against. Councillor Croft. Against. Councillor Daffin. For. Councillor Doughty. For. Councillor Elliott. For. Councillor Evans. Against. Councillor Gizane. Councillor Glass. For. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancocks.
For.
Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. For. Councillor Kondaka.
Against.
Councillor Llewellyn Nash. Against. Councillor Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Longdon.
For.
Councillor Pandear. Councillor Phillips.
For.
Councillor Pomfret.
For.
Councillor Rudkin. Councillor Andrew Sargent. Councillor Jane Sargent. Councillor Jill Shepherd. Councillor Tracy Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins. And Councillor Wilson. Mayor's casting vote.
Okay, Mayor's casting vote. That goes through. Thank you. Right, item 12, composition of membership of committees and appointments to outside bodies for 2018-19. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move... Hello? Yes, it is working. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the Cabinet as follows. My Deputy Leader, the Cabinet Member for Arts, Leisure and Economic Development, Councillor Ian Lloyd. Cabinet Member for Planning and Development, Councillor Neil Phillips. Cabinet Member for Central Services and Refuse, Councillor Jill Shepherd. And the Cabinet Member for Housing, Health and Communities, Councillor Longdon. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I move from the Chair that the Cabinet arrangement's been noted. Is there a seconder? Councillor Doughty.
Show of hands.
Right, so we'll move to take a vote on that then, so we can do this with just a show of hands. All those in favour? Those against? Okay, the casting vote. We'll move them. Composition of committees and overview and scrutiny panels. Councillor Jackson, can you outline your proposals for the composition of committees and overview and scrutiny panels?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. They are in the addendum at pages 6 and 7. I'd like to move those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I move from the Chair that the composition of committees and overview and scrutiny panels be approved. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Right, I'm going to move to the vote on this. This is not a debate. It's not a debate.
Point
Keith.
of order. The groups. Point of order.
It's right. I'm going to move to the vote with or without you sitting down.
What happens to the
So
independent member?
I'm going to take the vote, Keith.
Why can't we talk?
Right, okay. Right,
Why
moving
can't
to
we
the
ask
vote.
a question? Why can't we ask about the independent member and the change of
Right, I'm
composition
moving
of
to the
groups?
vote. All those in favour? Against? Okay, thank you. Right, membership of committees. Councillor Jackson, can you outline your proposals for the membership of committees and overview?
Mr Mayor, I think they're on page 6 of the addendum that's been circulated. They may slightly go on to page 7 as well, but I'll move them as printed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jackson. I'll move from the chair that the membership of the committees and overview and screw panels be approved. Is there a set? Right, move to the vote.
Why don't we have the ability to talk and ask questions?
All those in favour? Anybody against?
Please record my vote.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condicle. Representative on outside bodies. Councillor Jackson, can you outline your proposals for the representatives on outside bodies, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I am going to refer people to the addendum because in light of the changes in cabinet positions, etc., there are some amendments. So it starts on page 9 of the addendum. A5 member partnership is the cabinet member for planning and development. The champion for safeguarding children and adults is the cabinet member for central services and refuse. Coventry, Warwickshire, Hinckley remains the same. The district leader's the same. The local government association the same. The local enterprise partnership will be the deputy leader with the leader as substitute. The local government superannuation scheme consultation board, the cabinet member for central services and refuse. The Nuneaton and Bedworth Home Improvement Agency, the cabinet member for housing, health and communities. The Nuneaton and Bedworth Safer and Stronger Communities Partnership, the cabinet member for housing, health and communities. The Nuneaton and Bedworth Community Enterprise Limited, leader and deputy leader of the administration and the leader of the opposition, as printed. Turning over to page 10, Mr Mayor, Nuneaton and Bedworth Sports Forum, the cabinet member for arts, leisure and economic development. The next two as printed. Safer Warwickshire Partnership Board, the cabinet member for health, housing, health and communities. Warwickshire Direct Partnership, cabinet member for central services and refuse. Warwickshire Health and Wellbeing Board, the cabinet member for housing, health and communities. Warwickshire Housing Support Partnership, the cabinet member for housing, health and communities. Warwickshire Police and Crime Panel, the cabinet member for housing, health and communities. Warwickshire Waste Partnership, the cabinet member for central services and refuse. West Midlands Combined Authority remains the leader. West Midlands Employees, just to change the title again, Mr Mayor, cabinet member for central services and refuse. Adult Scrutiny Panel, chair of external scrutiny. All of those printed as their advice rights, Councillor Sargent, Age UK, Councillor Gutteridge, Armed Forces Covenant, Councillor Longdon, Astley Charity, Councillor Longdon, Biodiversity Champion, Councillor Beaumont. Building Control remains the same, Cabinet Member for Planning and Development, adding Councillor Hancock's. There is an error on the addendum, Mr Mayor, in regard to Bulkington Village Centre. The addendum reads that should be Councillor Lloyd. I think there's been a slippage on the scheme. It should actually read Councillor John Beaumont, and then the one below, Committee Management, Hartshill and Nuneaton Recreation Ground, would be Councillor Ian Lloyd and Councillor Lydia Hocking. The rest on that page, Mr Mayor, are as printed, and again on page 12. But Mr Mayor, on page 13, charity, you will note that Councillor Anne Llewellyn Nash has actually been appointed, it would appear, to 2 positions on the same organisation. I'm going to request, Mr Mayor, that we defer that to clarify whether there are 2 positions. I'm sure Councillor Nash is very capable, but doing 2 in one go I think might be a bit unreasonable of any councillor. So there's no untoward motive in that. It is just we need clarity of whether there are 2 positions. The others, Mr Mayor, are as printed. I trust that is acceptable. Thank you.
Okay, move to the vote.
These posts. Is that not how democracy works? And every year I talk about the biodiversity champion, and I'd like to propose Councillor Hocking for biodiversity champion.
We've had the seconder, we've had things put forward, we've had the seconder, we're moving to the vote. So we're going to move to the vote. All those in favour? Any against? Councillor Concord. Right, appointment of co-opted members. Councillor Jackson, can you outline your proposals for the appointment of co-opted members, please?
And I'd like to move that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I move from the Chair that the appointment of co-opted members be approved. Is there a seconder? Okay, move to the vote. All those for that? Any against? Okay, thank you, that's carried. Scheme of delegation, council functions. Councillor Jackson, can you move proposals for the scheme of delegation of council functions, please?
Indeed, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I move from the Chair that the scheme of delegation of council functions be approved. Ian, thank you for seconding it. Take to the vote. Okay, Councillor Concord, I've got to tell you again, this is not up for debate. This is simply seconder and take the vote. So we've had the seconder.
Mayor, we've had the seconder.
Keith, please sit down.
We had this document
right,
1 hour before
I've told
the
the seconder. Now we move to the vote.
Can you please tell me what's
all those in favour
in this
of
scheme
this
delegation?
Executive functions. Councillor Jackson, can you confirm the proposals for the scheme of delegation of executive functions, please?
Mr.
Councillor Jackson, I move from the Chair that the scheme of delegation of executive functions be noted. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Ian. Take the vote. Any against? Brilliant. He's left the building. Right. Right. Thank you, councillors and ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the business of the council. I now propose to close the meeting. We're going down for photos? Yes.